Hello and welcome back to the Undercurrent Stories podcast. My name's Bob Wells. It's great to have you with us. Today I'm chatting once again with my old school friend Steve Carroll. Steve's an artist, a lecturer, and author of the Diaspora science fiction series. This is actually Steve's fourth time on the show, so by now he's part of the furniture here. In this episode, we're talking all about characters, where they come from, how they change, and why they matter so much in storytelling. Steve shares some of the real-life people and experiences that inspired his characters. We also get into the challenges of writing believable heroes, villains, and relationships. It's a really down-to-earth look at how stories take shape. And whether you're into sci-fi, thinking about writing yourself, or just curious about how characters and stories come together, I think you'll really enjoy the show. I hope you enjoy it. Hello and welcome to Undercurrent Stories, Steve.
Hi, Bob. Good to see you.
Great to have you on. I think you're almost part of the tapestry here, aren't you? It's the fourth time that you've been on.
It is the fourth time, yeah.
Well, I mean, listeners must love you. So,
Right.
so today, I mentioned in the intro, today we're going to talk about, you've just brought out your third book in the Diaspora series.
Yes.
Which is a science fiction story. And I thought what we would do, and this is more for would-be authors or people who are just curious, I'd like to talk about characters.
Yeah.
But before we do that, could we just hear a bit more about you, please, Steve? What you're currently doing, how you got into what you're doing?
Oh, well, what I'm doing, I do several things. I'm a visual artist as well, but I got into writing. I wanted to be a writer ever since I was 12 years old. I was discouraged by my parents. It was discouraged by my school and teachers. But I kept going and I kept going. And like a lot of people during the pandemic, I started writing something, just something, and it turned into this story called Diaspora, which was basically a science fiction story with a difference in that it wasn't about spacecraft so much. It was about the destruction of cultures by a superior intelligence. And I thought that was something that was, quite interesting and, struck a chord with me as I'm an art and art history lecturer as well. And when I'd finished doing it, I was pleased with the story. But I just thought there's so much more I could do with this universe. There's so many other characters I really like, and I'd like to explore them and what happens to them and all that type of thing. So I ended up writing two more, and there's actually a fourth one in the planning. But I'll just talk about the ones we've got out, which are out on Kindle at the moment, and will be in paperback very soon. That one of the things that about science fiction is a lot of people don't like science fiction is because it's about things and ideas. Yes. It's not about people, and people who like character-driven stories don't like science fiction. They tend not to like science fiction because they think it's all about fantastical, crazy ideas, and they want to have a story which is about real people. And what I wanted to do with the second book is to make it more character-driven. And the story it's based on, when I was about 12, living around the corner from you, Bob, for some reason, I was watching a documentary about two brothers who'd both gone into the Vietnam War, two American brothers. One was a complete hoodlum, a complete tearaway, and the other one was a very bookish academic type. And they both went into the Vietnam War and they survived it. And when they came out, the one who was a hoodlum became a police officer and a pillar of society, whereas the bookish academic became a drug addict. And I was really fascinated by how a traumatic experience could actually take two people and they could actually swap over and become two totally different types of people, almost opposites to each other after that traumatic experience. And so that was the idea behind the characterization and behind the story, and that's what happens in it.
Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? How you mentioned how they diverged almost into opposite characters, and I suppose it must be the effect on the brain of the experiences that they had, in the same way that people who suffer brain injury or a stroke or something, it can change their personality.
Yes. It is, and that was what I was interested in. I was interested, why is that? There must have been at the beginning some underlying thing there going on inside them that came out, that was exposed during the traumatic experience of the Vietnam War. And in the case of the bookish lad, there must have been some real insecurity and some sort of nihilism in him that he came out a drug addict. Whereas the thug who ended up becoming a policeman, he must have had some regard for law and order, even though he was a bit of a thug. Or, maybe it was like a repentance thing. He realized he needed to change his ways, when he saw the horror of war. But that's what I wanted to examine in this story.
And talking about the story, the characters themselves, how do they normally come to you? Do they come fully formed, or do they evolve as you write?
They evolve as you write, but they always start off with something, and they usually start off with somebody I know, or in the case of the second book, the main protagonist is based on a young man lives in Baltimore, USA, who I knew him as a child. He was born in Nigeria, and I knew him and his family, and he used to call me Uncle Steve and things like that. And then he went off to America, and I recently met him in New York, and he's a really great young lad, really proud of him. And I just wanted him to be based on him, because he was somebody I was very proud of and somebody I thought people would like. But as the story goes along, you have to change things. It is a work of fiction, and you have to change. You have to think to yourself, well, why is he like that? There's one point in which he gives up completely, and he almost goes off the rails. But he sort of comes back to the path, as it were. So you have to think about them not being absolutely squeaky clean, cardboard cutout people, but they've got their temptations and they've got their problems as well. And so you have to put all that type of thing. And then the other brother in it was really, I invented him. He was really just like a mirror opposite of the protagonist. I just imagined him if he could have gone the other way, if he had certain insecurities, certain problems in his life, he could have gone the other way. With the what you call the less sympathetic character, I don't want to call him the baddie or anything like that, but the less sympathetic character, he has a certain insecurity in that what he wants to do is he wants to belong. So at the beginning of the book, he's trying to get into a gang, and he goes through an initiation ceremony to become a gang. And then as it goes along, he becomes part of this bad regime. It's almost like a political thing that he gets involved with. But with both of those things, what it's all about is belonging. He's adopted. He doesn't feel like he's really part of his family. His mother is a Caucasian. His adopted father is black. His adopted mother is Caucasian. So he thinks there's something wrong there, that he's not really belonging. He's not really in a family. And so, that's how it goes on.
You must, the way you were talking about them there, I know one of them was based on a real person, but you must sort of almost live with them in your mind.
You do a bit, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because before I wrote this, which is a proper novel, I worked in the field of graphic novels, which are like comic books. And I invented, I created a story which was to do with the Crusades, and it was a comment on the war on terror and that type of thing after 9/11. But I had to create some characters for that. And what was most remarkable is when you're sitting with the editor, the publisher, and the artist who's going to draw this thing, you're discussing the story, and they're saying things like, I don't think that character would do that. And suddenly you realize that it's not just living in your head, it's living in somebody else's head. You've convinced somebody of this character, and they're now saying, I don't think they would do that. And so that's very interesting.
Yeah, it must be, especially if you're quite sort of... Do you have to remain deliberately agile in your thinking in terms of if it is challenged, how you can change it?
Well, when you're working with a publisher who has he's putting up his own money for it, yes, you do. But I also fight my own corner. I can tell you that. But with with these books, which are self-published, But even though they're self-published, I want them to be as good and as professional as I can possibly make them, obviously. But you do sometimes find, I mean, the first book, there was one character who I completely rewrote. He was a kind of quite a hard character, but I went back and I made him into a very insecure character. And I changed the story, completely. Rewrote whole parts of it because I thought to myself, he needs to be somebody who's not sympathetic. He needs to be somebody who the other people would dislike as well. And so that was that. That's how I had to change that one.
And do you ever get characters that you sort of start off, having them as a character in your novel, and you think, actually, I'm really struggling with this. I'm going to get rid of them.
Oh yeah. With the graphic novel, there was one character I really liked, and I just had to get rid of him because there were just too many characters, and there was just too much happening. And I just thought, what can we sacrifice? I think it's more of a case of that you sacrifice characters more than not really liking the character. I've never come up yet with a character who I don't find interesting. I couldn't push somehow.
And what about a character of the opposite sex to you? How do you find writing that?
Well, that's interesting actually, because I remember Madonna saying back in the 1980s, it was something that really struck me that what she was trying to do in her act, in her persona, was she said in a lot of male written fiction, women are portrayed as either the virgin or the whore. And sorry, you don't mind me using that.
No, not at all.
Phrase on this program, but I thought it was
we
interesting.
don't censor it. It's okay.
Because at that, I remember when I was writing the graphic novel, and there were two characters in it. One was a gypsy woman, and she was, quite a harsh character, slightly unlikable, but interesting. And the other was a nun. And when I did those, I thought, have I fallen into the trap, basically, of the virgin and the whore? So it's like it's almost like the characters that men can control. The virgin you have nothing to do with. But
I guess you could put a spin on it and twist it round, couldn't you?
Well, yeah, yes, you could. But what I tried to do with this one is not fall into that trap and have female characters who were strong throughout. There's brave female characters who save the day. It is difficult. I mean, whatever anybody says, I'm not a woman, and I've been married for how many years? 42 years. But and so I've been living with a woman, and but I think it's still a mystery to me. And obviously I read stories with female characters in and that type of thing. But there's always just, especially with the political situation as it is at the moment, there's that just insecurity that you might not be getting it right. But I don't think I've offended anybody with my books recently.
And how much of yourself, in terms of your own characters, do you put into characters? Or have you had any characters that are basically you?
No. Well, there was one in the first book. There was a character called Gerald, and he was probably the closest to anybody who's like me. I mean, one of the things I think about me is that I am quite enthusiastic about life. I'm enthusiastic about things. And some people like that. Some people find it really annoying. And so I had this character called Gerald who was really enthusiastic, and he kind of drives and makes part of the story happen, but the people around him find him annoying. And that's probably the nearest I've ever got to putting myself in. And he dies after the first book. But the other books I've done, obviously there's a bit of you that goes into everything, but I've tried not to do that. I've tried to make them very different people to myself.
And in terms of the protagonist in the book, is it the classic sort of, the protagonist is on his journey, something happens dramatically,
yes,
and then he's on a sort of odyssey for the rest of the book until he finds something?
Yes. I mean, I think all of the books are like an odyssey. They are like a journey, and they're a journey where the person changes. I mean, that's very important, I think, in books and films. Yeah. I think there was a film. the one with Matt Damon, with on a space station, Elysium, which was a fantastic film. The biggest problem with it is that he doesn't change as a person all the way through it, and that's why it never was as big as it should have been. Apart from that, everything else is really great. And I do make sure that they actually change as people as they go along. And the main protagonist, I think everybody who's involved, they either get totally disillusioned or they become changed. They see things from a different perspective. That's all the way through all the books. Yeah.
Hi, it's Bob here. Just a quick interlude. Hope you're enjoying this episode. And if you would like to hear more interesting interviews, we have over 150 episodes to date with many fascinating guests talking about a wide variety of topics which include music, history, philosophy, fitness, food and drink, adventure, contemporary culture, and many, many more. I'm sure there's something that you'd really enjoy. So all you need to do is just visit undercurrentstories.com or search Undercurrent Stories in any of the podcast platforms. And now back to the show. And in this latest book, which I haven't read, but I'm looking forward to it, is there an antagonist?
An antagonist? Well, yes. There's the two brothers, and there's. I think that's the main story. I wanted to keep it basically about these two brothers, and so there is this. The one who he starts off incredibly bookish, and he ends up becoming like a tough guy and a very assertive person, whereas the other person who constantly just wants to belong, constantly is looking for his identity, he's really the antagonist. But as I say, I really tried to think in terms of the mirror image of the protagonist with that. I didn't have anybody in mind when I did that.
No. And so presumably then you enjoy writing more for the heroes rather than the sort of villains or morally grey.
I think both are interesting. I think writing the hero has to have faults, and the villain has to have things that you can identify with. I mean, when I wrote the first book, there were even people who thought that the antagonists had it right. And I thought, I was quite proud of that, actually, because I thought to myself, well, I haven't just done a pantomime baddie. I've done some people with ideas that people can sympathise with. And I think that's important. I mean, I think with this book, the idea of wanting to belong, I do think we all want to belong. I think we all, would like to be in a team. I think, I mean, even the lonely work of writing, you still at times want to be in a team, in a family, and something like that. And so in many ways, it's totally understandable. And there is a kind of logic to what is driving the antagonist. It's just that it's kind of, it's mixed up with some dark things. It's not a pure purpose. It's got some darkness in it.
Yeah, I wouldn't not so much sympathise, but I empathise with what you were saying earlier on about, and I probably include myself in this thing with science fiction. I'm probably put off a little bit by the technical part of it.
Yeah.
And the unbelievable stuff. I like strong characters, and I think most of us probably, if we're honest with ourselves, like a bit of romance.
Yes. And there's romance in the third book.
Oh, wonderful! Oh,
yes.
Wonderful.
No, I wanted each book. I didn't want a bit like what's happened with Star Wars, where a new film comes along and it's a little bit of a rehash of the same thing. I didn't want each book in the series, and there are going to be 4, to be a rehash of the same thing. I wanted it. The first one is a journey of discovery. It really sets the scene for the universe. The second one is the story of these two brothers. And the third one is actually a post-apocalyptic love story. And that was quite interesting, having been, it's been, 42 years since I fell in love last. I had to sort of think back to my teenage self and, what that felt like. And also the fact that you can tell in the relationship that forms, there's going to be trouble ahead. These are two people with huge differences, very different worldviews, but they've fallen in love. So yeah, that was interesting. But I did it. yeah, I think, I don't know really what to. I leave it to other people to say if they think it worked, but it was something I quite enjoyed doing.
And how difficult did you find it?
I did find it difficult. I found it difficult. The thing I want to avoid is sex and violence, because I find with sex and violence, it flattens people. It turns people into objects. They're either killing machines, victims of killing machines, or victims of, of lust and things like that. And I didn't want it to be about that. I did want it to be purely something quite pure. And, I don't know whether people might think that's naive, but I wanted it to really be about these two people cared about each other. They've almost like found each other, and they were, they wanted to be together for the rest of their lives. That was the most important things.
I think for a story, you're right. I mean, you look at all the successful TV series going on. I mean, I'm just thinking of Death in Paradise, for example.
Okay, yeah.
You've got a situation where it's not exactly unrequited love, but there's something being strung along the whole way through.
Yeah.
It never actually, in fact, in many cases, doesn't even get to a kiss.
No.
And yet it grabs the viewer or the reader, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, that was with the X-Files, Mulder and Scully.
Yes.
There was always this feeling that they were going to end up together. And it kind of just wasn't, it never quite worked. And I remember Gillian Anderson saying she felt that was one of the things that kept people going, even if they didn't like the sci-fi aspect of it. It kept them going. And
it's
I think
isn't it?
Yeah, and one of the films, they end up together, and I think that ruined it. But I think they should have just kept that tension going. Yeah.
And on the books that you've had feedback on, what characters sort of got the most feedback from? Or was there anything that surprised you from any of your readers?
Oh, yeah. The things that surprised me it wasn't so much about characterization. It was somebody posted a review on Amazon saying that although the story is set 6,000 years in the future, there's enough there to just hang on to. And I was quite pleased that worked. Because I didn't try to imagine what life and relationships and things would be like in 6,000 years' time. One of the things that I was aware of is that how civilizations can rise and fall, and how you can think about the Roman Empire that reached a zenith, and then Rome became a complete backwater, and we had the Anglo-Saxons and the Goths and all this type of thing. And it was this idea that you could have civilizations rising and falling, and so I had the idea of all the colony planets, all the different planets being at different stages. So the first one you come across is actually set in the 1970s. And then you've got one which is about 500 years more advanced than that. And they're all dotted around. And that's something I explore more in the fourth book. When it came to the characters, I haven't really had any feedback on the characters. I haven't actually had anybody say, I like that person, because most of the people who've been reading it are sci-fi writers, and they're people who are looking for the ideas. And I have had some feedback from people who do like characterization, and they still don't like the science fiction element. So I can't really say anything about characters who've worked, but they couldn't have been that bad if they finished the book. If the characters, I haven't any criticism of the characters. So I take that as being something that's good news. No news is good news, because there's nothing about the characters that stop them reading it. That's all I can say on that.
I've noticed actually the difference between the discussion that we're having this time is that we're much more. I know we're talking about characters, but you seem to have put characters very much more at the front of the stories.
Absolutely,
is that right?
Yes, they are. They're far more at the front of the story than the ideas. Because in the first book, I set out the idea. I set the scene. And in the second and third and fourth book, it is very much about characters. In fact, the fourth book, which I've already started, it's going to be called Tartarus. And Tartarus is an old-fashioned name for the underworld, or even hell. And what it's about, it's actually about depression. which I won't put that on the front cover or on the but it's actually one of the things I'm really interested in at the moment is where people's mental health is at the moment. I find it very interesting how people tell me, people who've come to this country, and they say the mental health in Britain is worse than it is in other countries. And exploring that is one of the things I'm looking at. And so in that, you have two main characters. One is a character, again, a very enthusiastic character who's trying to keep things going, and he's trying to lead, and he's trying to push people along and, keep people cheered up. And the other person who's a person who's living on this absolutely idyllic planet that has everything supplied for you. It's almost like living in paradise. And yet she's suffering from depression. And then she finds out everybody else is as well. And that's interesting. I mean, I don't really remember the story of David Stewart from the Eurythmics. He suffered from a thing called paradise syndrome. Where he actually was at the absolute top of his profession. He had money, he had everything he wanted, and he went through this incredible, terrible depression. And I think it's to do with keeping going. When you've got a challenge in your life, you've got something to get up for. I'm going to be retired by next April. I'm still teaching at the moment, but there's a part of me thinking, oh, good, we're going to have a bit of a rest. There's another part of me that says, what will I get up for? And so I'm writing these books, and I'm carrying on painting and all the things I'm doing. And I'm going to carry on doing a bit of teaching because you just need something to get up for. I think, it's the next stage in life for me. The next challenge is retirement. And so, it's all these types of things that I am exploring now.
Yeah, I think we all, as you say, we all need a sense of purpose. And for people who haven't got a sense of purpose, it can be quite challenging.
Yeah.
So this book so you've got your fourth book coming out in this series. Then you're going to finish. Are you going to be carrying on writing after that?
Yes, but I'm not going to be writing science fiction. I want to do work in different genres.
Okay.
And I want to do one book which is going to be a horror story. And I've got plans for another book, which is actually more almost autobiographical. I want to write a book about what it was like to grow up as a child in the 60s, which you and I both did. Because when people talk about the 60s, they think, oh, Summer of Love, it was all great and it was all marvelous. As a child, I don't remember it being that good. I think the hippie thing was very small. Not everybody was a hippie. I hated. I was so upset as a child, constantly seeing stuff about the Vietnam War on the television almost every day. There were a number of things about the 60s which I found very disturbing, growing up as a child, and it's actually set in a little village like Old Windsor. It's going to be called A Child of Aquarius. And it's going to be about a man who was a child in the 60s, and then it's going to jump backwards and forwards, and to how all the dreams of the 60s they kind of fizzled out, and that's what it's going to be about exploring that. That's it.
Yeah, it was interesting, wasn't it? There was all this sort of peace and love, 67, 68, 69. Then Woodstock came along.
Yeah.
Then 1970, Hendrix died, and it all became a little bit tarnished.
Yeah, it did, and Jim Morrison died, the Beatles split up. And I can remember, when the 70s came along, even though I was only 10 and I'd never known any other decade, I knew something had ended. I knew some kind of big party had ended. That we were going into a different age. And the 70s, there were depressing things about the 70s, but gosh, wasn't the music good?
I was going to say, there were some fantastic. I think the fashions were fantastic. The platform boots, the loons, the tie-dye T-shirts, and the music
is incredible.
As Ian Hunter said, the golden age of rock and roll, and it truly was.
Yes.
But I would say that, wouldn't I?
You would say that. Well, both of us would, yeah. But yeah. So that's what that's the next. The plan is to move into some different genres. I did have the idea of coming back to the Diaspora universe. I might do. You never know what's going to happen. But I just think to myself, I'm going to, after the fourth book, I think I'm going to just put a lid on that. and try my hand at something else. Because it's like, when you're creating an invented world, you don't mention things like what brand of tea they were drinking, or what music they were listening to.
Right.
You don't have anything about the fashions or the celebrities of the time. It's a completely made up world. But I'd like to do something where I do refer to popular culture.
I think that'd be really interesting. And I know when we spoke about doing this particular interview on characters, my immediate thoughts went back to, and I did him for A-level, Thomas Hardy.
Yep. We both did it.
Yeah, we did, didn't we? Mayor of Casterbridge.
Mayor of Casterbridge, yes.
Mayor of Casterbridge. What a book. And
yes.
That is character, isn't it?
Yes.
That is character.
Well, that is like there's something about Henchard, the Mayor of Casterbridge. He's almost like his story is almost set in stone with that first episode, in the fair when he sells his wife. Yeah. And then he tries to become a reformed character, but it comes back and haunts him. And it's absolutely, really painful, that book, how often he tries to just redeem himself, change it, whatever he does, it just never works.
And I think it also emphasized how near poverty people were then.
Oh yeah. Oh, it was. I mean, how desperate people were. They had no power, did they? Yeah. They were completely. Well,
this has been a really interesting conversation, Steve. Thank you ever so much for coming on. I think one of the big sort of takeaways we've got from this conversation is just how central characters are to any story. So whether it's science fiction set thousands of years in the future or something much closer to home, we've learned how real life experiences can shape fictional characters, how trauma and challenge can completely change the course of a person's journey, and why it's important to give both heroes and villains real depth. I also love Steve's point about keeping stories fresh, not falling into cliches, but letting characters surprise you as they develop. So for anyone listening who's thinking about writing, there's plenty here to inspire you. Start with people, stay curious, and remember that it's often the flaws and struggles that make characters come alive. My guest today has been Steve Carroll, author, lecturer, and artist. And you can find details about Steve's books in the show notes. Thank you for coming on the show, Steve.
That's okay. It was real pleasure. Anytime.